This is part 6 of creating a user and authenticating using Firebase. We have worked through most of the more complex part of creating an account with Google and saving that authenticated user into the database. So now we just need to set that up on our registered user and then test it, the login. And setting these features up are fairly quick and easy. So what I'm going to refer to is the documentation again. So in their documentation for password authentication, this section is going to give us the method to create a user with email and password. And this is the function that we'll use against our registered user form. I'm going to copy and paste this create user with email and password method, and I'll bring up my text editor again. And in the registration file, where I have my on submit function, that is where I'm going to go ahead and just place that in. So I want to make some changes to this code here. I called firebase.auth just auth, so I will update that. And instead of this being a .then.catch for the promise, I'm going to just use the try and await instead, since this is an asynchronous function. So I'm going to just delete everything from .catch to the end of the code. Next, I'm going to go ahead and call in my values from this .state. So I'm going to say const display name, email, password, and confirm password. That equals this .state. Next, I want to create the try catch. So I'm going to say try, and at the end of try, I'm going to say catch, and I want to catch the error. And then when I have the error, I want to log it out. Okay, and inside my try, I'm going to go ahead and put the create user email method inside of that. And I'll fix up the format of the code later because it does look a little messy. Okay, so what I also want to do is I want to store our registered user as a variable. So I'm going to create a const and say registered user equals. So I'm saying once we have the registered user, we're assigning it as that registered user. And before, I'm going to say await and before the create user method, just so we can make sure that we actually have all the form field and everything back before we're actually trying to store that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the registered user into our add user document. So that way it can be saved in the database after it's registered. After that, I need to just set the state back to empty fields in the form. We don't want to leave those values there. So I do this .set state, and I'm going to grab those empty values. Okay. So right before the on submit, or right before I'm pulling out those variables at the top, I do want to just do the event prevent default just to make sure our form isn't refreshing or submitting before we have any of the values. And then I want to add this onSubmit function to the form. So I'm going to go into the form and say on submit equals on submit. And I believe that should be all we need. So I do have that add user document at the top, so it is being imported, so make sure that is happening. So I'm going to save and try to test this out. So I'm in my login page and I'm going to go ahead and test this out. Now I can enter pretty much whatever I want to because the form does not have validation on it. So you want to make sure this is a validation form in a real environment. And I'm just going to go to the network tab so we can see the flow. So submit, and we're getting some 200 responses back. So it looks like we got that user, so let's check to see if they're in the database. All right, so we did get a user back, and if we check the authentication, we should see that user there as well. So we don't see the other 3 authentications listed here because I deleted them on accident earlier. But now we have the user that is signing in, registering for the first time, also being saved into the database, just like a Google user can do as well. One thing that I did want to point out, that if you have some difficulty getting a user to store into the database, that it could be because of the auth state change method on the component did mount. So inside the app.js file in component did mount, we want to make sure that the add user document function is also pulling in that authenticated user, because the auth state change method is, an observer, so it's looking at who signed in and what changes are actually happening in the app. So when a new registered user is coming into the app, we do need this function here to make sure that it also recognizes that it needs to save the registered user into Firestore. So I'm going to go ahead and create another user. I didn't remember the password from that first user that I made. And what you'll notice is that my form didn't actually reset. So these fields should clear because inside of my submit function here, I'm trying to set the state back to empty fields like it originally was, but it's still holding that state. Going back into the database, I can see that I have a new value. So that's being stored. So what we want to do is figure out how to handle clearing the form. But now we want to set this up so now that hello logs in, our app does something. So probably goes to a private page or shows something I'm not building out any other pages, so we'll maybe set up an alert for when the user logs in. So if we go back into our documentation, and we can see that we have the sign in with email and password method that we can use. So we're going to use that inside of our login file. So if I go back into the login, I have my on submit here set up. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that method in here and do the updates that I need to. So I need to update this to saying auth. And this is a promise, so you can still keep it as a dot, then dot catch. We're going to do the same thing I did with the registration and just do the try and catch. So I need to bring in my variables. So I'm going to try to sign in with my email and password. If I get an error, then I should print that out. So I'm going to alert you have signed in if this works. So I need to bring in the auth that I stored from Firebase. Okay, and let's test this out. So here I named this hello, and then I'm going to enter the password. Oh, I think I forgot to put the function on the form since I saw it refresh so fast. So I need to say on submit. On submit. I'm just going to clear this whole thing out. Hello. You have signed in. So now we know our sign-in process works, and normally, of course, we probably would want to actually do more, go to another page, display something else, etc. So the problems that we have with the app is this cleared, but when I registered, that form was not resetting. I'm going to try to register someone else again and see if it resets, but that would be something that would need to be fixed, obviously. But for now, a lot of it is functioning. So yeah, it's still not working. For some reason, this reset, but this did not. And then we have our new user, and we can check that we're also being authenticated. And as mentioned, there's no form validation, so pretty much anything goes. So validation would be something you want to set up. So just to test that registration file out more, I want to put an alert on there just like we did the login. So underneath the add user document, I'm going to say alert, you are now registered. I'm going to refresh. You are now, okay, so we know we know it's definitely working because we're getting a database, but I'm just not sure what's going on with this dot state. So I may just need to isolate registering your user alone without everything else, because I'm not exactly sure what the problem is. So there is just a little bit more that we need to do in the app.js file, and that is to make sure that we unsubscribe from listening to the app, because we do not want to have memory leaks. So if we start doing other things that doesn't require us to be subscribed and listening, then we want to make sure that that is turned off. So inside of the component did mount, I'm going to say this dot unsubscribe, and that's going to be associated to our auth state change. And then I'm going to say component will unmount, and inside here I'm going to say this dot unsubscribe. And this is also a part of their on-state change documentation as well. So that pretty much wraps up getting your login set up with Firebase and storing the users in there. As far as what you do with the project, like redirect to another page, display certain data, that's where you want to just take this further as far as building your app. So in the next video, I'll probably just try to work on fixing that dot set state that's not working in my registration file, and then work on getting this deployed to GitHub. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video was helpful and you were able to pick up on some tips and learn some things about Firebase. And hopefully you are more comfortable using Firebase and Firestore in authenticating. You might want to challenge yourself and try to do other methods to authenticate, like Twitter or a phone number, GitHub, Facebook, and see how you work with that as well. Also, please drop some comments if you can tell me some other ways that I can write some code or any other type of constructive feedback. So please like, share, subscribe, and hope to see you in some future videos.